Would you like some tea? My team can make you some tea if you'd like some tea.
I would love some loose leaf tea in a metal cup.
Why don't you want this tea?
What you're doing here is tapping into my. Sometimes my friends don't want to talk to me because I'm like the bearer of bad news. Where it's like, what is Rhonda going to tell me now that I shouldn't be doing that I love doing, right? Another obsession of mine of late has been microplastic exposure. And I know you've talked about this on the podcast before, and it's in the news now. A lot of people are sort of familiar with microplastics, right? Breakdown of plastic particles that are tiny, depending on the size, and getting into our circulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of microplastics, you think of plastic. When you think of plastic, you think, oh, that plastic water bottle. Yeah, well, I'll just avoid that plastic water bottle, right? What you don't realize is that everything has plastic. So you have here this to-go coffee cup, which I don't know how many coffees and teas I've had in a to-go coffee cup, but it's hundreds and hundreds. And the thing that's so disturbing is I learned that, all of these paper-looking coffee cups are actually lined with plastic. They're lined with a plastic liner to prevent the liquid to, leaching into the paper, right? And that plastic lining, when you add heat to it, i.e. boiling water for tea or hot coffee, it accelerates the breakdown of the plastic lining. So you're drinking microplastic beverages and also the chemicals associated with them. So there was this classic study that was done that showed heating up plastic essentially causes these toxic, plastic-associated chemicals like BPA, bisphenol A, which is an endocrine disruptor. It disrupts hormones. It sort of mimics estrogen. So, it's sometimes called an estrogen mimetic. It causes that to leach into your beverage 55 times more.
55 times?
55-fold, yes.
Which is 5,500%.
It's a lot, yes. And so you're talking about drinking, plastic chemicals and microplastics. So that was okay, well, fine. I'm going to bring my mug in anytime I'm traveling and ask them to put my coffee in that. So I see so many people with these to-go, paper cups and they're drinking coffee in it. And it's so hard for me because I realize it's this plastic soup that you're drinking. Now you have a tea bag on top of that. And that is something that there have been over the course of the last 7 or 8 years, there have been studies that have come out that these tea bags are made of, there's plastic polymers in them. And so there's thousands of microplastics that are released in every milliliter of tea from these tea bags. And there's a variety of different tea bags. Essentially all of them release microplastics. The ones that look like they won't, release them. So now, while I used to drink a lot of tea when I'm on the go, I bring my own with me. I bring my own loose leaf tea with a little, one of those little steepers that can steep the tea. And I use that mostly because of the heat, it's accelerating that breakdown. Yes, I'll drink water out of a plastic bottle sometimes when I'm traveling because there's no other options. And actually there was a study that just came out. I'm sure you saw it. Did you see the study that showed glass had higher levels? So water that was in glass had higher levels of microplastic than water that was in plastic containers. This was a study that came out of France.
Oh, come on.
You didn't see this study?
No.
Oh my gosh, this is
everywhere.
Everywhere. I mean, it came out, I don't know, in the last 2 weeks or so. The study came out of France, and it was essentially showing that glass bottles had more microplastics in the liquid that they contained than plastic bottles, which contain liquid. And you might go, what? That makes no sense, right? I mean, why would the glass have plastic particles at a higher level than a plastic bottle? Well, it turns out that the paint on top of the lid of the glass bottle has plastic polymers in it. And so the paint is flaking off and getting into the water that is contained in the glass bottle. There is, I think, a silver lining here, and that is, there might be more microplastics in the beverages that are in the glass bottle compared to the plastic bottle, but the size matters. So it was shown that the size is larger in the glass bottles compared to the plastic bottles. And
The size of the plastic.
the size of the microplastic. And there's a reason why this is important, because microplastics and nanoplastics, as you get smaller in size, they get smaller. They're called nanoplastics. Those are the most dangerous because it can be more easily absorbed in the gut and get into the circulation. If it gets into circulation, it can more easily bypass the blood-brain barrier and get into the brain. Size matters. And so the larger size flaking off from the paint is less likely to be absorbed by the gut and to get into circulation. Now, this has to be shown. I'm sure the study is going to be done next. Like, this is going to be the next study. It hasn't been shown yet.
I've heard you talk about fibre as well playing a role in getting microplastics out of our body.
Okay, so yes, so fiber is interesting. This all comes from animal studies. And fiber seems to play a role in the absorption of microplastics and nanoplastics in your gut cells. And that's really important because if you don't absorb them, it's excreted through feces, right? And it's been shown we only absorb about 1 to 2% of these microplastics that we're ingesting. Fiber, what it does is two things. One, it moves the microplastics through the intestines quicker, right? Which is what fiber does. But I think the more important thing is the type of fiber. So you want this fermentable type of fiber, soluble fiber. That's the kind of fiber that's really good for your gut microbiome. And what that does is it's essentially creating this viscous gel-like, mucousy stuff inside of your gut that encapsulates the microplastics so that it can't be absorbed by the gut, what are called the gut epithelial cells. And so if you're essentially not able to absorb those microplastics, then they're not getting into circulation. And that's like the biggest thing that you can do, right, is not get them into circulation. Now, this is all based on animal evidence. I did speak with a microplastics researcher at Harvard, Dr. Carrie Nadeau, and she wasn't even aware of this. And now she's like on it. So I'm hoping that there'll be some human evidence coming soon looking at whether or not microplastics, if you're eating fiber, if that can basically blunt the absorption of the microplastics into the system. I think people that are eating more fiber in their diet probably are getting less of that microplastics into their system, but that hasn't been shown in humans. It's only been shown in animals.
I'm guessing you don't eat canned soup either.
Yes. Yeah. So the canned soup is interesting. Again, aluminum cans are lined with this plastic, lining. And that prevents the sort of breakdown of the aluminum, right, the metal. Unfortunately, it also causes these chemicals like BPA that are in the plastic lining to leach into in this case, the soup or the beverage or the liquid that they're contained in, right? There was a study that showed, I think was it 1,000% increase of BPA after drinking like soup out of a can versus a soup out of a glass. 1,000% increase in bisphenol A levels. I mean, that is
Bisphenol A levels being
BPA,
which is the bad thing in microplastics.
It's one of the bad chemicals in plastics that is an endocrine disruptor. So it's disrupting hormones, and that can play a role in a lot of different things, depending on what we're looking at. So it's hugely important for obviously like neurodevelopment in children. So like pregnant women, but even like, disrupting hormones in general, like mimicking estrogen. I mean, that's not something that guys want to do either, right? So it is something to be aware of. But the thing is that, BPA, it was this beautiful marketing strategy that came out, I don't know how many years ago, but all this BPA was replaced with something else that wasn't BPA. It was BPS. And so now everything is marketed as BPA free. And people think that is like, oh, it's not dangerous. It's BPA free. However, what it's replaced with is doing the same thing as BPA, if not worse. And that's been now shown in multiple studies. So it's also an endocrine disruptor. It's doing the same thing. And yet people think, that it's safe because it's BPA free.
Did you hear about this study of people that live close to a golf course?
Yes. Yeah. There's a study that came out, I don't know how, it was very recent, maybe a month.
2025.
Yeah. So I think it was a couple months ago. And the study showed that people that lived within a mile or so of golf courses had a much higher incidence of Parkinson's disease, right?
It says 126% higher risk.
Right. Okay. So then why is that, right? And this is where I want to get into the pesticides issue, because it's known, like any scientist that's done research in neurodegenerative disease, it's one of the ways that you induce Parkinson's disease in animals is you give them insecticides. You give them essentially a pesticide. So rotenone being one, paraquat. And what that does is a mitochondrial toxin. So it's basically causing your mitochondria to die, and then essentially when the mitochondria are dying or apoptosing, the cell undergoes apoptosis and dying. So you can induce Parkinson's disease in mice by giving them these types of these types of insecticides and herbicides. So it's well known that can cause Parkinson's disease. It's important to know that it's mostly the ingestion of it and not the inhalation of it. And that was a big concern because it gets into the water source. And that's what's thought to be the underlying cause. People that are living close to a golf course, it's contaminating the water source, essentially. And so people are drinking these pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides, right? So a water filter, like a reverse osmosis, water filter or something like that can filter out some of these molecules, hugely important. And I think that's the solution to people that are living near a golf course or people that are living near any sort of agricultural place where they're using a high volume of these types of, herbicides.
What is the most important thing we haven't talked about that we should have talked about, Rhonda?
I think we talked a little bit about magnesium, but I don't know that we talked enough about magnesium. And it is important because it's something that is required for, over 300 different enzymes in your body need it to function properly. So it's what's called a cofactor. And I mentioned DNA repair enzymes. So it's also used to make energy. So you need magnesium to make energy and to use energy. You need magnesium to repair damage that's happening all the time. And close to 50% of the population in the United States does not have adequate levels of magnesium because they're not eating the foods that they need to get the magnesium. Dark leafy greens, I mentioned it's at the center of a chlorophyll molecule. There have been studies that have shown that for every 100 milligram decrease in magnesium intake, there's a 24% increase in pancreatic cancer incidence. And that's in a dose-dependent manner. So you keep going up and up. I think that people don't realize that they're not getting enough magnesium. Magnesium is required to turn vitamin D3 into the steroid hormone. So some people have a magnesium, insufficient amount of magnesium they're taking in, and they're actually not able to make enough vitamin D into that steroid hormone. Again, magnesium is controlling 300 enzymes. Some of those enzymes are actually the ones that are converting vitamin D3 into the steroid hormone. So magnesium is hugely important. It's something that can be easily corrected. The deficiency can be easily corrected by taking a supplement, but also eating more leafy greens, which is the best source of magnesium. The question is, what do supplements do? What kind of supplement do you take? How much should you take? All these things are, I think, questions that people are interested in.
So I've got some magnesium here. Is taking magnesium going to have a positive role then on my speed of aging?
I do think so. I think so, yes. We talked about cancer incidence, right? Magnesium, so I think magnesium is one of those sort of minerals that is, when you don't have enough of it, it's causing that insidious damage over time that accumulates and then rears its ugly head, in the 5th, 6th, 7th decade of life. And that ugly head happens to be cancer. So I do think that if you are able to avoid magnesium deficiency and insufficiency, then you are going to be able to basically make sure there's enough magnesium around for everything in your body to use it with what it needs it for. So,
and I've heard you say that 50% of people are deficient in the United States in magnesium.
Right, close to 50%. And not to mention, you just talked about, electrolytes. Well, athletes, they actually require between 10 to 20% more magnesium than the general population because of their magnesium losses are so great. And so they can be even more deficient. Magnesium is needed for red blood cells. And so, people can have lower energy as well. So magnesium is so important for so many different things. And, like I said, I do think there's a trade-off here where whatever magnesium you are getting from your diet, if you're not getting enough of it, it's probably going to make energy instead of being used to repair damage, because you need to make energy every day, right? That's the most important thing. If you don't make energy, you die. Like, you can't survive. So whatever magnesium your body is getting, it's not going to that process of repairing DNA, which doesn't really matter until you're in your, 5th, 6th, 7th decade of life and cancer, risk increases, right? And so there's this idea, this was put out by my mentor, Dr. Bruce Ames, called triage theory, and he's shown some evidence of it. Magnesium is one of them, where magnesium seems to be triaged to energy production at the expense of repairing your DNA.
What does that mean?
It means that if you're not getting enough magnesium through your dietary intake and you're not supplementing with it, whatever magnesium that you're getting, there's 300 different enzymes that need it to do their function, that your body is finding a way to triage it to the most essential functions that are going to basically help with short-term survival.
Triage means it's basically allocating.
Yes, it's allocating it to the processes inside your body that are essential for short-term survival right now.
Got you.
Long-term health, diseases of aging like cancer, that doesn't matter as much, right?
If you're deficient.
Yeah, your body basically says, no, I'm not going to give whatever precious magnesium I have right now to prevent cancer, because I need to live long enough to reproduce and pass on my genes, and cancer doesn't happen until I'm well past that, right? So this idea, it's called the triage theory, and it's been shown for several different micronutrients. Another one is vitamin K. So vitamin K is really high in dark leafy greens. Well, what Bruce has shown is that vitamin K is important for a couple of things. One, it's important for blood coagulation, blood clotting. And that all happens in the liver. You activate proteins in the liver for blood clotting. If you don't have vitamin K, you can't do that, right? It's one of the reasons why when a baby's first born, they give it a vitamin K shot so that they have blood coagulation.
On your YouTube channel, you made a video about magnesium, which I recommend everybody goes and watches if you are interested in going deeper on this subject. And on your YouTube, I found a stat that said for every 100 milligram drop in magnesium intake is linked to a 24% higher risk of pancreatic cancer.
Yes.
Which is shocking.
It is. And again, it comes down to the DNA repair enzymes that require magnesium to be activated. And if over a lifetime, you're part of that 50% of the population in the United States that doesn't get enough magnesium, then you're talking about not being able to repair damage to your DNA over decades. And essentially what that means is, at some point, damage happens to your DNA in the right part of a gene that is what's called oncogenic. It's cancer-causing. And so eventually it's going to cause cancer if you're not able to repair that damage, right? And so getting enough magnesium is important to make sure you're repairing that damage. And it's not only important for cancer, but also all-cause mortality. So there's also studies showing that people with the highest magnesium levels have a 40% lower all-cause mortality than people with the lowest magnesium levels. And they have a 50% lower cancer-related mortality compared to people with the lowest levels. So again, cancer is still in there. And we're seeing that magnesium intake is very important with respect to cancer. And that is something that people don't realize when they're not getting enough of magnesium in their diet, they're not eating their leafy greens, or they're not taking a supplement, that they're sort of affecting their long-term risk of cancer.
So people with high magnesium levels have a 50% lower risk of cancer death than those with low levels.
Right.
And is that, you obviously can't do like a double-blind placebo-controlled test on that. So they're really establishing causation. So it could be other things like, it could be the other dietary factors that go into that. Maybe if we think about causation, people that eat a lot of hamburgers don't have a lot of like leafy greens.
Exactly. You nailed it. Essentially, Magnesium is packaged in these foods that are beneficial, like dark leafy greens, and there's so many other benefits along with them that you can't establish causation and say, aha, it's just the magnesium. I would argue it's probably not just the magnesium, but magnesium does play an important role. It's just you can't, of course, pinpoint it to just magnesium because you're right. There are many other important healthy things in these in these plants that are beneficial for health as well.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.